All right, g'day. Welcome back to Collectivitis, and an extra warm welcome back to dear Max, our my co-host here, who has been away for a while. So welcome back to the show, Max.
That's right. You couldn't get rid of me.
Well, the three young female fans that we have were screaming and banging at the doors because they weren't as interested in the show without your beautiful visage among us. So we had to recall Max back. So welcome back to Max. Where have you
Thank you.
been, Max? Tell
Thank you.
everyone.
I've been gallivanting around the world. Not really. I've just been to California and Mexico. Got some good stories. Got caught up in a few political protests. They just seem to follow me nowadays since 2020. Attended my first protest. Now they're just
Well, I
They knew
mean,
I was in town. They were like, right, we better fucking protest.
I mean that California and Mexico is pretty around the world enough for me. I think that's about as around the world as you can go without
Well,
going.
yeah, pretty much. Yeah. You go any further around and you actually get closer to home again.
Yeah, exactly. If you dig a hole in the ground, you don't actually end up in China. You end up in Mexico.
And if you dig a hole in LA, you end up in a nicer place.
Yeah. If you dig a hole in LA, the homeless start living in it. So
Get out of my hole. It's my hole.
So we're going to do something a little different today with the show. So bear with us if you are a regular listener. Normally we'll either talk about current events or interview some guests, but look, Max has been away. Max has some interesting stories to tell about other places. So what we're going to do is I am going to interview Max and ask him about what he's done around the world. And I think the main reason why this is particularly interesting to me is that one of the flaws with libertarianism is that when you become a libertarian, you become insufferable for a number of reasons, but chief among them is the fact that you see libertarianism and the problems with the state and the problems that libertarianism addresses just about anywhere you go. And so with that lens, I think it'd be quite interesting to have a look at how California, which has become a very sort of a hub for Democrats and wokes and lefties in the US, and also Mexico, which lots of the South and the central parts of America have lived through socialism and communism and all sorts of revolutions and all sorts of poverty and all sorts of state oppression. So it'd be interesting to hear not only what you got up to, but what you got up to from that particular lens.
Yeah, well, it is quite interesting. Like I've traveled to some random places around the world, but this is the first time since I've been so politically engaged and from like that libertarian point of view. And like it's hard not to see everything from that point of view now and like analyze everything you see.
Yeah, well, that's right, and that's exactly why I think this would be an interesting interview to do. So let's not beat about the bush any longer. So start us off. The first place I think we were going to talk about is you went to the lefty hellhole that is California. So what was California like?
Um, to be honest, I mean, it wasn't as I mean, I was in the nice areas. I was in the touristy areas. I wasn't out in the suburbs, so I didn't get to see it all from
So suburbs of where? Sorry, in California.
Los Angeles. Let's start with Los Angeles. So I mean,
Okay.
we may have joked before I went away that like there's people shitting on the street, and there's homeless people everywhere. I didn't see as much as that as I thought. Like plenty of homeless people. Didn't see any shitting on the street, except for me when I couldn't find. No, I'm kidding. Um, yeah, didn't see as much as that as I thought I would. In terms of homeless people though, everywhere. Like
Right.
I was expecting more, but they sort of just like congregate in hubs almost. Much more than you'll ever see here in Australia. It is quite sad. You'll almost want to talk to them and get each person's story. I'm sure
Yeah.
a lot of it's probably recent. Like a lot of them look quite well kept together, like young people. So you're thinking not necessarily drugs or the roughest upbringing, perhaps even just a rough couple of years.
Right.
Probably thank the government for that and led them to, yeah, end up in the streets.
Yeah, well, so because I've never traveled, I've traveled, but never to America, and certainly not to California.
You've just been to Italy about 20 times.
Yeah, I've just been to Italy about 100 times. But the the kind of the impression that we have of Los Angeles as libertarians, even like sort of listening to US people talk about it, is that it has degenerated over the last number of years into sort of these slum areas. Obviously, it's kind of contained to some certain ones of these areas. There are nicer areas of the city. But yeah, this idea that it's sort of changed over a period of time is kind of the impression that I got of LA. Had you been to LA before and noticed any difference, or is this the first time that you'd been to LA?
First time. So yeah, only had, movies and funny jokes to know about it.
Yeah. Okay. And did you talk with many people? And I'm not talking about the homeless specifically, with many Californians, because obviously California, for those who aren't aware, is probably the deepest blue state in the US, the most Democrat voting state. Their governor is Newsom, who had some of the worst COVID policies in the US, probably comparable to Dan Andrews here, although it sounds like they locked down less in the end. And yet they remain like, it's like the big blue state in the US is California, the big red one is Texas, and those ones kind of haven't shifted in a very, very long time. So did you talk to anyone like, or not even anyone in particular, like in engaging with people? I'm assuming you talked to people. What was the kind of vibe that you got, or did you avoid politics talk altogether?
Avoided politics talk, if I'm being honest. I didn't really talk to too many locals. I didn't have a heap of time there, only like a handful of days. So I was just like, doing the sightseeing, all of that. Didn't talk to homeless people. Homeless people talked to me.
Did they think you were one of them?
Possibly, maybe. No, just what they're like. You walk past them and then making conversation. LA is pretty much just like a big movie set almost. Like, I'm not sure if you played, or even like a game. I'm not sure if you played Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah.
Back in the day, it's like you walk past and people are just having conversations to themselves, and you're just like, oh, cool, random.
Right. Okay. Yeah, because the most recent Grand Theft Auto, I think, is a fictionalized version of LA specifically. So kind of that portrayal of the decadence and the fall from grace that
just everybody is an NPC in LA.
Right.
So oh no, that's what I was going to say. Sorry, Gavin Newsom. Did you see the video of him in China this week? He was like visiting China, as most
no, I didn't.
Socialists do. And he had we'll call it a ScoMo. He was playing basketball with some Chinese kids and tripped over and like squashed one.
Well, that's not fair. The Chinese are all shorter. Why would you play? Oh yeah, all right. I played basketball against the Chinese kids. Yeah, I also won a cooking contest against the Nigerians. Go me! I'm really good. Like,
do you remember that video of ScoMo though when he was playing rugby and he just like fucking killed a kid?
Soccer. He did it as well. Was it? There was one where he played soccer and he sort of trips over and stacks on top of the kid. Has he done it more than once?
It appears so. Politicians should just avoid playing any sport in front of cameras, like John Howard with the infamous cricket ball.
Well, the most odious of all of those was when Rudd got a bit popular because he played down ball at schools and he milked it for all it was worth. He was doing like ads for other ventures of his, like 10 years on, of him still going around to schools playing down. But
well, man, disgusting. at least he was good at something.
Well, he wasn't even good. It was just initially funny because he was this doddering like loser who was appealing because he acted like he was down to earth. Anyway, you didn't go to the US for us to talk about Kevin Rudd. It's just,
well, he spends more time over there than anybody else.
Well, and that's a good point. So, I mean, obviously you wouldn't have seen him, but Dan Andrews was spotted just days after resigning at an airport in New York, which was predictable as anything. Why would he go on living in the state that he had destroyed when he can go somewhere else in the world where people don't hate him because he didn't oppress them directly? Someone else oppressed them, which is...
I don't know the specifics, but he does have business and property in New York. So, I mean, there was rumors years before that was like the second he, departs, he's going straight there because he'll have private security for the rest of his life if he wants, but like, he's not going to be able to live a normal life in Victoria.
Yeah, no, and why would he want to? Like
Yeah.
if there was ever a clearer example that not only did he not have the interests of Victorians at heart, but like the interests of the people of Mulgrave who elected him as their local member every time. No, he was just sucking every last
Mm.
bit of wealth and bit of personal esteem that he could out dry, and then so that he could go live his best life somewhere on the other side of the world.
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean that's kind of the perennial cycle. We see it now with there's a lot of rumorings around Newsom being the potential Democratic candidate if something happens to Biden, because the Democratic Party obviously doesn't want Kamala Harris to take Biden's place. Biden is awful. The only reason they'd run him is if they literally can't get rid of him. And who knows if Biden makes it to the election? It looks now like he may, but who knows? But Newsom, ruins California, is quite good in front of a camera, is quite well spoken, looks, compared to Biden, looks like
Mm.
the perfect candidate. Ruins California. California in a the cost of living and all the rest of that stuff there is through the roof. Homeless problems, drug problems, poverty, etc. People fleeing the state in record numbers. The only reason that Texas is looking less deep red than it has in the past is because of all the Californians fleeing
Yeah.
California and moving to Texas.
In saying that, so I also went to San Diego. Like although people are fleeing LA, a lot of them are just moving down to San Diego. So I know San Diego's like on the border with Mexico, like year round, beautiful climate, nice beaches, small enough city, but bigger and like big enough if you want it to be. So it doesn't take that long to get around. The city was slept on for like quite a while. It was like
Yeah.
the perfect place to live. And as we saw over like the COVID years, people want to get out of cities and or head to new cities that are a little bit more relaxed. All of a sudden, like literally as of 2 weeks ago, I don't know how they do these rankings, but San Diego has become the most expensive city to live in the whole of the US, over LA, over New York. So there's like, although people are leaving, there are a bunch of people moving specifically to
Within,
San Diego.
yeah. Oh yeah, which makes sense. Something I don't know if you had any experience with this. Something I've heard about California is that it's like anywhere else, really. It's the cities are very deep blue, deep Republican, deep
Mm.
left. But as soon as you go country, it's just the same as anywhere else in America,
Yeah.
where most of the geographical region of California is very Republican, and sort of
Mm-hmm.
even sort of as you go up north, it becomes much more kind of right wing conservative in the countryside. Is
Well,
that
you've got like it's such a huge state, and you've got like those 3, 4 major cities that San Diego, LA, San Francisco, excuse me, and then yeah, you've got this huge like rural area too that people sort of forget about in California. You got desert.
Mm. Yeah,
I
and
don't know. People in the desert don't vote left. It's just a rule around the world.
yeah, there's no soy lattes in the middle of the desert, so they're not interested in moving there. Um, cool. Well, yeah, and so it sounds like they're better at disguising their fall from grace maybe than we would assume. So I take it that the areas of Los Angeles that you went to were quite nice. The sort of touristy areas, they're still held up.
Yeah, like the places look quite nice. They're quite clean, but they've got 10,000 government workers walking around cleaning it 24/7. Because if they didn't, I'm sure maybe that's why there wasn't shit on the streets, because it's just being cleaned up like pooper scooper straight underneath. Just clean it up before it hits the ground.
Well, it's perfect. There's the more poop on the street, the more jobs for public servants. So
Exactly.
it's the
Genius.
it's why would you want the homeless to stop shitting on the street? Did you notice a big sort of public sector there? So I'll give you a comparison. The when I've traveled to Italy since being a libertarian, something I've noticed is that the public sector in Italy is not only so big and bloated, but it's ridiculously inefficient. Like our public sector here is pretty inefficient. There, it's like blatantly so.
Mm-hmm.
Like you'll
Yeah.
have a single cashier at a desk of a train station with you and one other customer just trying to buy a ticket for the train that leaves in 10 minutes, and he goes on his lunch break for 15 minutes and just sits there with his feet up on the desk, ignoring you completely. Like that level of just disdain for the member of public, disdain for your doing your job in any way diligently. It was there
Mm-hmm.
that kind of feeling in California?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt. And then on top of that, like there's so many like public sector vehicles just driving around everywhere you see. And again, they're not doing very much, you know. They're just cruising. They're the ones with job security, for now anyway. As you've seen in Victoria, lots of public sector jobs finally got cut because we realized, oh, hang on, we can't afford it. So who knows, maybe that'll happen over there too. One thing you do notice over there though is, I don't really know which like lens to look at this from, is that the people in like the private sector jobs, geez, they take their job seriously. Like, you know, over here we're quite relaxed, you know, we do our job, whatever. Over there, like you got the guy, like, you know, standing on the side of the street for a private car park, like trying to like lead people in, and he's swinging his flag all day, like, and putting everything into it to be like, come to my car park. Whereas over here, you know, if I was doing that job, I'd be like, yeah, come on. Come on. Then I'd be like, okay, there's no cars coming for 100 meters. I'm not going to wave my flag. But these people, like,
They're hustling.
They're hustling. And I don't know if it's because there's shit job security, or if, like, you know, maybe just that divide between private and public sector over there is like so strong that like they really fucking care.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. Something that the US has, just speaking on that, something that the US has that we don't have here in Australia, which is a huge deal, is they have the idea of competitive federalism. So the way their system is set up, like the states tax and spend for themselves, like their economies are kind of separate in that sense there. Whereas we don't do that here in Australia. Like each state has its own debt, but like the taxation is done centrally, and like it's then meted out. So there's no real benefit here to a single state doing things more efficiently or not. Whereas there, like if California is going down the drain, you know, in a giant ball of flame, comparatively, the other states can continue to do well, and their dollar is not necessarily destroyed. Well, the dollar probably is weakened anyway, but it's weakened from a million other things. But the other states can have better economies if they've spent less frivolously. So that probably, I mean, that could be an interesting comparison. I don't know. Have you been anywhere else in America and sort of seen a difference in the public sector somewhere else?
I've been elsewhere in America, but like 6-7 years ago. So before I was really looking at it that tightly with that, like that libertarian or even just like politically aware sort of lens.
Well, that might be something for if any of our viewers travel to the US.
Yeah.
So have a look at that. Have a look at how different states, how their treatment of public funds are, because it can be different from, you know, literally crossing one border.
Yeah, the only other place I've really been in the US was New York and Boston. And I mean, like New York is obviously just as blue as LA, if not more. Like New York City, it is, not New York State.
Yeah. Well, New York State probably as well.
Probably too, but yeah.
It's sort of the same. It's the same as everywhere in the US as it is here. It's the cities tend to be really, really left leaning, and then as soon as you get out of the cities, the rest of the country is right leaning. We saw that here with the voice referendum maps. Where the vote yes was contained entirely to the inner cities, and then as soon outside of the cities, it was the vote no, and it looked exactly like a US you know, presidential election map.
Yeah, well, obviously with the referendum like that, I mean the way that was set up is different to the US electoral system, obviously, but you know, no won the popular vote. Whereas in America, you know, like I think it was when Trump got elected, a lot of the furor was around the fact that Hillary actually won more votes supposedly on the popular vote by like, it's only a little amount, but with the electoral system and like the electorates, you know, it was an overwhelming majority towards Trump, and that's always an interesting discussion. If more people have voted for somebody else, should they be elected? But it's also like, well, she doesn't represent the country as a whole. She represents these tiny little pockets, you know? So,
and that's the whole point of their electoral system, is to avoid inner cities controlling what happens in a country, because the perspective of someone in an inner city doesn't take into account a lot of like the chain of, you know, the supply chain requirements of the country, and like the way they would spend money would be then completely localized to inner cities, and it wouldn't be fair even by the standards that, you know, any democracy is fair. But that's the whole reason why they have that.
Yeah, exactly. I know I'm 100% for that system, but it is also interesting though when like I wonder what the threshold is for how far someone could win a popular vote before it's like, oh my god, they've absolutely smoked the other person, but they've lost on.
Yeah. I think it's fairly uncommon that someone wins the popular vote and loses the actual election. Like, it obviously happens from time to time, but you can bet your bottom dollar that if Hillary had won the election and had lost the popular vote,
Oh
no one
yeah,
would have given a flying fuck about it.
yeah, exactly. The argument would have just
Yeah,
would
exactly.
have been flipped.
Dissipated.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's move on from California and uh, head somewhere else where you saw some more vivid kind of. Well, I mean, the US is exciting and all compared to us in terms of their politics, but there's nothing quite like Central and South America for going hard when it comes to politics. We've talked in the past about looking at Javier Milei's election run in Argentina and the massive crowds and they just seem to do things on a bit of a higher.
Mm-hmm.
On a higher level than
They're passionate
we do, or
people.
even they're passionate people. That's one way to put it. So, tell us a little bit about your experience in Mexico. What did you get up to there, and what did you see?
So let's start with Mexico City. So landed on October 2 in Mexico City. I'm not sure if any of our viewers already know the significance of that date. Complete coincidence. I'd never heard about like what was about to unfold, what I witnessed.
Max has never opened a history book, guys. Come on.
Hey, had you heard about October 2?
No. I'm being facetious. I had no idea about this particular day.
So landed in Mexico on October 2, which is a significant day in their history.
What happened on it? What's the significance of this October 2?
I'll get to it. So it was just I was with two of my sisters at this point. So I traveled to Mexico for my sister's wedding, and I was with my two other sisters. We're in Mexico City. We're just casually getting a taco, as you do, in the middle of the city. And all of a sudden, hear this music, hear these drums, hear these people chanting. We're like, oh, there's a protest going by. And it looked like a few hundred people, whatever. And then as that sort of first group moved on, there was another group of a few hundred people, and they had like different signs, wearing different clothes, different music, and then this just kept going on. There was heaps of different groups, and it was quite a large demonstration in the end. So we were like, oh, I'd had my camera out because I was just taking photos of the city, as you do. We're like, all right, let's pay for these tacos. Let's follow the protest and see what's going to happen. And we're like right in the heart of Mexico City too. So I should also like preface this with like we'd got there. There's like this beautiful city square. It's called the Zocalo, and there's like a huge flagpole. There's like a beautiful cathedral and like this beautiful government building. I say that not convincingly because a lot of taxpayer dollars went into making it beautiful. But they were all fenced off. They're like these huge metal fences around all of them. And we're like, oh, that's a shame. Like, must be doing construction or something, must be touching it all up. But like, it's a shame that we don't get to see these buildings in their full beauty.
How innocent and naive of you. Oh, they must be doing some construction.
I know. It's like, geez, they're fucking big metal fences as well. And like, they're like arched over the top. So like, nobody could possibly climb it if anybody wanted to have a look at this construction, make sure they're doing a good job. And yeah, anyway, so we followed it, and then I saw people spray painting, in the city, like breaking off from the group of protesters and writing their messages. And I don't speak Spanish, but my sisters do, and they were like translating some of the signs, and it was quite mixed messages. Like, but they all sort of seemed to be anti-government to some degree. Some were talking about some event which happened on October 2. Some were like, there was the socialist faction of this protest, like saying like, fuck the government, please give us free healthcare, this, that.
So kind of like the what was that? There was that protest movement in France a little while ago, the Yellow Vest movement, which kind of comprised a whole bunch of like, it was an anti-government sentiment, but it kind of comprised everyone from libertarian to anarcho-capitalist to socialist to communist. That was just kind of an amalgamation of all of these, and everyone wanted to make it its own, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's what it seemed in the end. So that's what it seemed. So anyway, we're like, oh, let's just follow it for a little bit. Like we were 500 meters from the square where the protest finished up anyway. So we followed him, and then so it started to get a bit ugly in the end. So I'll go into the.
So history. How many people at this point do you think? Like
5,000-10,000 maybe.
Okay. Yeah.
And I'm sure there would have been more if, like, I'm sure a lot of people left because they knew it was going to get quite ugly.
Yeah. So 200 or 300 according to SBS.
200 or 300 violent protesters.
Yeah.
Actually, there probably were 200 or 300 violent protesters, and the rest
right. Okay.
Just there.
So did you feel unsafe at this point? Was there a...
No, not at this point. Not at this point. So I should probably touch into the history of October 2 before I talk about how ugly it got in the end.
Okay. Yeah.
So all this research was done in hindsight because obviously we were caught up in the protest, didn't really have, it was going to stand there on my phone and be like, oh, why are people protesting? We translated from a few people, and a few people like told us in Spanish what was happening, but like we couldn't really get the gist of it. And then when they explained it to us, I didn't know the full history. So anyway, on October 2, 1968, in Tlatelolco in Mexico City, there was a group of students protesting the fact that Mexico were just about to host the Summer Olympics, because they were saying like our country's fucked. Like, why are you spending money, bringing the Olympics here? Like a standard sort of student protest.
Yeah.
And they ended up getting massacred. So I think there was like, I don't know the exact amount of people protesting. There was like quite a big crowd, but 300 to 400 people, this is like recent estimates, have worked out 300 to 400 people were massacred, were shot down by the Mexican armed forces, like all students at this protest. So what this protest that I got caught up in was the 55th anniversary. So every year that they march on October 2 from Tlatelolco Plaza, and I think it's maybe like 10 or 15 kilometers to the city center from there. So they march from Tlatelolco Plaza to the city center to the main government building. So just the reasons why they got massacred, according to the government, is that they thought that, the students started firing and were like insinuating violence. So they were like, oh, fuck, we better just gun everybody down, to stop them. Recent reports have revealed that the government actually had snipers on the roofs during this protest. And then my understanding is that the snipers had a few shots, knocked a few people down, and then the Mexican armed forces retaliated to that. So I don't know whether this was like orchestrated, snipers on the roofs, like shoot so that way our armed forces have justified reason to start blitzing all these students.
So the snipers on the roof were like shot not at people, like just shots in...
I'm not certain if they were shot at people or if they were shot just to, aggravate the armed forces. So who knows if it was actually orchestrated for that exact plan to happen, or if maybe there was lack of communication. The snipers maybe saw someone as a target, shot him, and the armed forces are like, fuck, people are shooting, we better just gun 300 to 400 students down. It's so funny that, because, well, it's not funny, but the documents and everything like that, and like the reports for so long said that 44 people were killed.
Right.
44.
So how have these new like developments come out in recent years? How recent is it? How have they been?
I don't know how recent, but sometime in the last like 20 years. So, it's 1968, but I believe it's the last 20 or so years that, there's been a lot more investigation and research into what actually happened.
Right.
In 2018, the government actually came out and said this was a state crime, like, because, so 2018 was like 50 years. So 50 years, they denied any wrongdoing. And now they've come out and admitted it was a state crime. Obviously the people want more though, like the people of Mexico.
Yeah.
Because they're still protesting. It wasn't just like, oh, okay, the government admitted it's a state crime, let's stop protesting. They're still filthy about what's happened. There was one sign actually in the protest which said it is more dangerous to be a student in Mexico than it is to be in the cartel, which I thought was a pretty strong message, because up like especially in the north of Mexico, the cartel run everything. The police and government in cahoots with them, just like protect each other, keep out of each other's way. Cartel, you guys run everything. So I don't know, I thought that's a pretty strong message.
So 55 years on, it makes sense, I suppose, especially if more stuff keeps coming out of how much worse the situation was. Like 55 years is living memory, not just for some people, but maybe your brothers, sisters, nephews, nieces of the students that were shot potentially. So every year since the year of this, like on the date. It's not an ongoing week-long protest. It's on the date. They just all get together and kind of a very organized kind of type of, almost violent, it sounds, almost violent rally, like spray painting. Were they throwing things?
Yeah, they were. So it is like my understanding is the main protest is on the day, but I think there are other regions where protests go on further on in the week.
Yeah.
Obviously, this is the big main one. I don't know if they've been doing it like since 1969, so the 1 year anniversary onwards, or if this is just like the last 25, 30 years. But like
Right.
currently it's every year as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, so as we got to the city center and we started getting like a little bit more of an understanding what was happening, it did start turning quite violent. And like also, sorry, because we got there that day, we'd seen busloads of police, like, going by, like buses with like 50 police in them, like full riot gear. And we're just like, oh, I don't know, it's Mexico City. This is probably just a normal thing,
Yeah.
So yeah, started getting a bit more violent. There were people throwing Molotov cocktails over the fence at the government building.
Wow.
So you were hearing explosions constantly as these were landing and going. People like big metal fences. These people weren't going to actually get through them with like deodorant can flamethrowers, but like flamethrowers against the fence, trying to like, I'm not sure if they're trying to melt it or just trying to like maybe have flames go through the cracks in case there was a cop standing on the other side. You never know.
Jesus.
Yeah, people like, one thing I don't fully agree with is like destroying the architecture in the city. Had hammers and they were like smashing up stones and like brickwork. So they'd get like rocks from it to throw at the windows of the government building over the fence.
Right.
There was also like government insiders in the protest. So I had my camera out at this stage. It was pissing down rain too, and taking heaps of photos. And one guy came over and he was like, probably want to put your camera away because there's like obviously insiders in this protest. They're going to identify you. They're going to take you in. They're going to take your camera because they will want to look through your photos to identify protesters.
Wow.
So, I mean, I did get some good snaps, which I mean, for any of our YouTube viewers will pop up on the screen while I'm chatting, I suppose, for you to have a look at. But geez, it would have been, I wish I'd just felt that a little bit more like secure. I would have got a heap more.
Yeah. So
then
is
anyways,
the idea that like, because I imagine I'm sort of drawing conclusions here. Tell me if I'm wrong. All the structures and protective stuff that they put around the buildings, were there obviously to protect the buildings, but also because I'm guessing it's impossible to have any sort of responsive police presence for this kind of event because it kind of incites the exact same thing that the protest is about. Like if police started using violent means to shut one of these protests down, it's kind of like, oh, well, see, it's police brutality. And the people protesting are probably likely to get violent to the police if, in this sort of fervor of anger and justified rage. Is that true? So were there no police on the ground or few police on the ground?
No, there were a lot of police on the ground.
Okay.
They were all on back streets. They were like around corners, like ready to come in when they needed to be. Like during the actual protest, there weren't any police on the streets. The protest just went.
Yeah.
I did see photos from behind the fences and like so like the government building side of the fence, and it was just lined with riot police. Like, so if any of the fences went down, like they would have been ready to storm. And the amount of riot police I saw in the end, like no exaggeration, in the thousands. There were a lot.
Wow. Okay.
A lot, like ready to go.
So it could have got hot if it needed to. They could have got hot with these.
Yeah. So it got to the point and we were like, all right, like, the noise and the violence from what we could see is really ramping up. So we were like, it's probably time for us to like, maybe make our way towards an exit here. Because, I love the adrenaline, but I was like, I'm probably not ready to die today.
There's easier ways to be an adrenaline junkie than go protests.
It is a different kind of adrenaline though. It is exhilarating.
I'm sure that's why they do it. That's why they protest every year, because they're just adrenaline junkies.
There's got to be a few people in there just for that. Well, as somebody who had no understanding of what this protest was about and being caught up in the middle of it, for me, it was pure adrenaline. I was like, fuck, I could stay here all day if I like, knew I wasn't going to get murdered.
Yeah. Well,
that's one thing.
You weren't going to get murdered. Where's the fun? Where's the adrenaline coming from then?
Good point. That's one thing I didn't actually think about that you mentioned though, is that, it would be very, hypocritical and like prove the point if the police did just unload on all this new wave of protesters. And I don't know how this protest stacks up to other years. If this one was like a big bad one, or if like, this is quite tame compared to last year's October 2 protest, who knows? It's actually quite hard to find information on the protest itself online, because I was like scouring the internet for weeks, and like there was only a couple of articles I could find, and that really didn't touch into like what specifically happened on the day I was there. You know, it was just like, oh yeah, they're just protesting again. You know,
Yeah.
um, like if you had a protest like this in Australia, man, it would be front page news for a year. It was
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's different. Their standard, their bar
yeah.
is so much higher there for something to be. We talked about the protests here with the tradies and the police, and yeah, there was stuff thrown and rubber bullets shot at people in the street, which is horrific for
Yeah.
Australian and Western standards. But nothing anywhere near 400 students getting mowed down indiscriminitely. That's a world we can't even imagine, thankfully.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, so anyway, sorry, so to just to finish up the story, so yeah, we were like, it got to the point where like, all right, well, we should probably start heading out. And with the city square and the way it was fenced off, there were like 3 main entrances / exits. So we were like, looked across, okay, that one is fully like blocked off with riot police and the shields. And then we looked at the second one and we're like, okay, that one is also fully blocked off with riot police and shields. And we looked at the third one and they were like rolling in all the riot police. And we were like, fuck, all right, we should probably like, just make a beeline straight for that. And as we were going out, like, we started choking up and everything because they'd obviously released tear gas in the main part of the protest, and it was spreading out to the exit where we were. So yeah, like it was about to get very, very hectic. I think it dissipated in the end because we ended up getting out and finding a rooftop bar to go sit on, like which kind of had views over like the backside of the city square. So we couldn't see the actual protest, but you could hear like constant explosions, which I think were Molotov cocktails and like cans exploding.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't think it finished up like, guns blazing, obviously, but like far out, man, it was pretty hectic. And I was like, is this my life now? Am I just getting caught up in political protests everywhere?
Well, so remind us again, what was the name of this protest for people who want to look into it themselves if they're interested?
So
the initial massacre, sorry.
So yeah, so the Tlatelolco Massacre. So Tlatelolco spelt Tlateolco. And I do plan on doing a lot more research into it now that I'm home and I've got the time, because it is like quite interesting.
Yeah, well, especially if you've lived it. That's what lived the protests response to it. Obviously not lived the actual thing. And
there were
also,
so on top of the 350 to 400 estimated murders, there was like over 1,000 injured as well. So I don't know if that was just like, maybe stampede, or if that was like bullet spray, or
Well,
so,
I mean, typically
like,
when there's a shooting, the number of injured generally outweighs quite significantly the number who die. Like lots of people take bullets and stuff, and without it hitting something enough to kill them. So it would make sense if there were 300-400 killed, that there would be an even higher number just from the gun spray, or potentially even stampeding could add to that. I'd like to mention, for those who do just listen to the podcast, I will put a bunch of the pictures that Max took over the video section of this part of the interview. So if you are interested in checking out some of the images of what Max captured for this Tlatelolco Massacre, do check out our YouTube.
Also, probably maybe pop some on our Instagram stories as well.
Yeah. That's another good spot you can see that.
So also just put into context the like the amount of injuries. The protest was estimated to be 10,000 students protesting. So if you have over 1,000 injured and 400 like murdered, that's a huge, like that's 14% of the protest was injured or murdered. Like that's a fucking big number.
Yeah, that's such a high risk.
I would be
14%. Yeah,
I'd be very interested to see like the weapons they were using. Like
I'd be very interested to see if there was such a high, like if it didn't have the effect of stamping down protest for a significant amount of time after that, because as enraged as you can be, I don't know who's risking 14% to make a point. I don't know, maybe Central Americans and South Americans go harder than we do, but that's a high number.
Yeah, it is fucking huge amount of people to be hurt. It's a huge percentage.
Well, that all makes California's shitting on the street look very tame by comparison.
Yeah.
How so where else did you go after Mexico?
Well, I'll stick to Mexico City for a second.
Yeah.
Like, so I was there for like 3 or 4 days. So after the protest, so once it all cooled down and everything, just hanging around the city, checking things out. One little thing about Mexico City is very interesting, and other parts of Mexico too, but specifically in the capital, the ultimate test of the free market. It's very, very bizarre. So they've just got like these. You'll walk down a block in the city, and every single shop will be exactly the same. It'll be like, okay, here's all the butchers that specialize in chicken. Then you get to like the next block, and it's like, okay, here's all the handbag shops, and then you walk another block, and it's like, okay. And when I say block, I mean like multiple blocks. Like it's almost like districts.
Yeah.
And then you've got like, so like the district of like all the bike shops. And it's like, this is a good test of the free market. It's like, how good are you at selling your product when every single shop on this street is selling the exact same product? It's like, obviously it makes more sense to have like, one butcher, one handbag shop, one bike shop, So, you walk down the street, you go get your bike, go get your handbag, go get your chicken. But it's like, okay, I want those 3 things. I've got to go to 3 different districts in this city. It's a very, very bizarre.
So,
like,
do you know if that's due to regulation or is that just naturally occurring?
No
how
idea.
their market has naturally occurred? Because I mean, I'm trying to justify it in my head. Like, why could that possibly be? Is it because, like, say, there's a specific district for whatever chicken, and if you're after chicken, you have to go there. So if you're a chicken shop, why would you open anywhere else? People aren't going to go anywhere else for chicken. They're going to go to the chicken district. I don't know. It may not be true because then, like, people would probably go places that's close to where they live as well.
Yeah, that's the thing. You'd open like your local butcher, and then like you'd get all the business from those people in that area because they don't have to drive 20 minutes to the chicken shop district.
Yeah,
You
that's
just
pretty
go to your
interesting.
local district. It was quite bizarre. And it was almost like comical, especially like butchers and things like that. I mean, it's 20 chicken shops in a row is too many, but like everybody needs meat.
Yeah,
But bike shops, like 20 bike shops in a row, it's like,
yeah,
like how many people are buying bikes like every day? Or like, it's a big city with a huge population, but
yeah,
it's quite interesting. But I was like, it's looking at this from the libertarian lens, it is the ultimate test of the free market because it's like, how good's your
yeah.
product?
I'd be
You want business,
interested.
you're going to be better than the 20 shops next door to you.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know whether that is caused by regulation or whether that was naturally occurring, purely because of the free market. What was the strangest district that you came across?
Honestly, probably the bike district. That's why I brought
Right.
that one up. Like there was some, like it was just like every single shop you could think of had like its own little district, but the bike one was just the most random one because it's like it's not a thing people are buying.
Like, how
every
often do you
day.
buy a bike? Is it
Yeah.
your weekly bike and you'll try a
Yeah.
different shop this time? No,
I know.
you're
A
probably
bike's
going to stick to the bike
disposable.
you
Like,
have.
oh, I've ridden this one once. Throw it out. Go get a new one. Yeah.
Yeah, that is weird. Yeah, I'd be very interested to know if that's naturally occurring or not.
Hey, one thing I'd love to see in Australia is more street vendors, but I don't think regulation in Australia would prevent that. Like, it would, like, one, it would be completely outlawed, or two, licensing would make it way too expensive. Like, because I love walking down the street in these places and like, someone's just riding by on like a little cart and they're selling fruit cut up for you already. It's like, cool, here's the fucking $1 and I've just got my fruit intake for the day. Whereas like over here, with regulation, it would be, oh, here's $20 for half a bit of watermelon. And it's like, oh, well, it's not really worth it. I'll just go buy it myself.
Yeah, and everyone's terrified of, the Australians are very terrified of that whole idea of the unregulated market. It's like, well, if it's not regulated, it's probably, laced with ayahuasca or some shit. Like, what?
Fuck yeah.
Sure, someone's
Load
wasting
me
that
up.
on a 30-cent slice of lemon, but whatever. But yeah, there's just there's lots of things about the Australian psyche that you only realize once you go overseas, where you're like, that couldn't exist here because we have this, I don't know, whether it's the number of different things, trust for the government. I've noticed Australia has a lot of a kind of tall poppy syndrome that you don't notice until you come back, where elsewhere, even in the US, I would imagine it's kind of, the whole idea of hustling and doing what you're doing and giving it 100% and being really into your passions or really into chasing your dream or whatever. Whereas over here, there's kind of this toned down sort of, oh, that guy's trying at something. That's fucking weird.
Yeah, like
probably
how
stop doing
cringe,
that. Try
how cringeworthy,
hard.
man. Like, just take it easy.
Yeah, like couple of losers with a fucking podcast. That's oh yeah.
Oh, that's
That's
good.
good. Lowers the competition of other podcasts you can listen to. This is Collectivitis that you're listening to right now.
What episode is this? Like 36 or something like that?
37. So
37.
yeah,
That's probably like 35, 34 more episodes than most podcasts.
exactly. And if you are thinking of starting a podcast, that's weird and cringy, and you shouldn't do it.
Especially a libertarian. Like,
Yeah, way to
fuck off.
insulate your potential audience. Anyway,
Hey,
so
we should
after
translate this to Spanish and then get it circulating in Mexico.
yeah, we can get
Hola,
one viewer
hola,
there as
amigos.
well.
Welcome back to Collectivitis.
That's not Spanish, Max. That's just English with a Spanish accent. And really racist, probably.
Mexicans are dumb. They don't know any different. No, I'm just kidding.
That was racist. Anyway,
hey,
enough
speaking
about
speaking of racism and diversity, like, well, not we weren't talking about diversity, but you know, like LA is a very diverse place. For any of our viewers, before I went away, might have remembered that I had broken my wrist and I was wearing a splint and a cast on my hand. You should have seen the tan I had for the first few weeks. I was black and white. Like I was the most diverse person in LA.
they thought you were some kind of, well, maybe not the people in LA, the people in Mexico thought you were some kind of witch with this withered white hand.
Oh my God. They just had Day of the Dead, and I wish I'd planned it because it would have been cool to be in Mexico for Day of the Dead, which is like every year. Like I think it's like 2 days after Halloween. They have their own, like spooky holiday they take so seriously.
Yeah.
That would have been cool to be there for.
Yeah, no, it would. You could have had like a skeleton hand if you just painted your hand the black bits of a skeleton and had the really white part.
The white part would have glowed in the dark. Hey, so I was also meant to go to Guatemala on this trip, but I had to cancel that because, sure enough, the country's just had elections and there's a huge furor about the elected government. So the country's gone into protest and basically shut down. So I couldn't go there. So when I say these things fucking follow me, I'm not even kidding.
Sounds like you're following them. It sounds like that went before and you're following the protest. So what happened in Guatemala? There was Tell me a bit more.
They had elections maybe like a month ago, and from my understanding, the like new government got elected, but the people don't, or sorry, the existing government are like, no, fuck this, like, you know, we don't want this new government in, so they're trying to like not leave office, you know, prevent this new government from being sworn in. And the people of Guatemala are like, well, no, that's corrupt as. So they're trying to get the attorney general fired, and they've just like basically shut down the whole country. Like ultimate people power. You know, it was still safe for tourists to go. Like I'd met people who were going, but it was just a matter of fact that like I had this live map of blockades. Every road had like a million blockades on it, so you could not get through, and they weren't letting anybody through. Didn't matter if you were tourist or a local. After a while, they did start letting like food supply trucks get through because people were like starving. So they're like, okay, we better let these people through. I'd heard stories of like tourists going into the country and like what would be like a 1 hour drive. They'd have to get a private driver, go in the middle of the night, take these back streets, and it would take them 12 hours. And I was like, you know, I can still enter the country, but if I'm going to be here for like 4 or 5 days, do I really want to spend 90% of that in transit getting around blockades?
So is it like a traditional thing that every time there's an election, like the losing party goes and blocks the government or something, or was it a one-off?
This is a one-off as far as I'm concerned. So like I did see, like I joined a few Facebook groups for updates on what's happening to see if I could get in or not, and so I was getting like a fair bit of insight from tourists and from locals as well. And from my understanding, this is like Guatemala's biggest fight for democracy in like over 50 years, which is why they're like holding on to it and then not letting it go. They're like, no, fuck this government. Like we elected this new government. So the new government, I believe, like center left, and the people want that. And the existing government, who I'm guessing, if the new government's going to be center left, I'm guessing the existing government will like, you know, center right or right leaning. The people are like, well, we're not going to let this go. Like, we're not letting you just hold on to power. Like, we elected somebody else. Which is, it's like pretty hectic timing as well. Like I said, the protests were, as far as I could see, safe.
Compared to the for the fucking New Mexico one you'd just been to.
Yeah, exactly. In saying that though, like one of my sisters did also go to Guatemala before me. She'd flown in like the day the protests started. Actually, my sister Ashley, who listens to this. So hi Ashley, I'm talking about you. It's one of our listeners.
One of the two.
So she landed in Guatemala City. Guatemala City is a shithole, like to begin with, let alone protests. Like the rest of the country is beautiful, but the city is an absolute shithole.
In what way? Like run down, overpopulated, favelas, slums kind of thing?
Basically. Yeah. And then she spent like, I think it was like 12 hours, maybe a day in the capital city. And she went from the airport to a hotel and back to the airport. And in that time, she saw like people loading guns on the street, like violent protests. So, yeah, the city's shit, but the rest of the country was safe, supposedly.
Okay, right. Yeah, interesting. I feel like, well, to be the boring libertarian and give a libertarian insight, it seems to be the case that increasingly, like the importance of elections kind of leads to this rebuttal or rejection of accepting the results. Like we saw in 2020, the whole Trump thing, how he just said no, election was stolen, and whether it was or it wasn't is completely up for debate. But his supporters believed that the election was stolen and were willing to, go down swinging about it. And I think that it sounds like a similar thing's happened in Guatemala here. It seems to be something happening everywhere in the world. Maybe not so much Australia yet. Maybe our economy needs to get a bit worse first before people are willing to do that. But it's kind of when the state holds so much power, as it increasingly does, you can understand that whoever is in government, like it becomes really important. It's not just he won this time and he'll win this other time. It's like, well, the most powerful institution known to man in history, the US one certainly, and probably every country, is the strongest, the largest version of the state they've ever had. It's kind of like, well, you're right, this one is bigger than the previous one because it has more power. So you can understand why there is this rejection of accepting the results, because so much rides on it when you
as times have gotten so much worse that we've seen in the last like 5-10 years, the implications of these governments getting elected is so much bigger. So the people, like, they just can't accept that at the moment. Like they're a lot more involved and passionate. They're not just like, complicit and complacent. They're really riding these results and really need like their result to go their way. Also, they believe.
Exactly. Right. Well, so that brings to the end of your gallivanting around the world, does it?
Pretty much. I think I messaged you during because the Argentina elections were on. I mean, I was still like fucking ages away from Argentina. Like Central America to South America is a long way, and but I was like fucking closer than I'm ever going to be. So
that would have been cool if you'd managed.
I was like, far out. Should I just get a flight to Buenos Aires and for the election? And like, I looked at the prices and I was like, okay, no, this is ridiculous. But that would have been cool.
Javier Milei is fighting to improve cost of living, and I'm going to spend $10,000 to go see him do it. That'll save my cost of living.
Sadly, he didn't get elected in the primary election, but it's gone to the runoff election. I'm not sure if you've touched on this in previous episodes or not, but
we talked about what had happened. So I'm sure we'll talk about it again when the runoff actually happened.
I think it's November 19 or something like that. So a couple of weeks away.
Close to the Mulgrave election, so we'll have a couple of elections to talk about. Around then anyway. But stay tuned for that. We'll definitely be talking about him and everything about him. And it does kind of suck you didn't get to see him, but that would have been a cool experience, like the stadium full of cheering fans, as if like you're there to see some sports game. You're waiting for the spectacle, and then it's just this really animated rock star looking bloke with sideburns down to his kneecaps. Shouting about how he hates leftist idiots
and just shouts out "Long live freedom, damn!" all the time.
Oh, long live liberty, fuck!
That's what it is. Yeah, that's what it is. Of course, yeah.
Viva la libertad, carajo!
Carajo, yeah. Good. Hey, if any of our listeners have more information on the Tlatelolco Massacre or even what's going on in Guatemala, or wants to like correct me on anything, because I've kind of like. I've done a bit of research, but skimmed a little bit. Please send us a message or comment and let us know. Keep us updated, because I would love to learn more about it. And also, like, if I've got anything wrong, I would love to be corrected. I did as much research as I could, but I was trying to continue traveling and enjoying my time without getting caught up in things that had happened in history.
Well, and if anyone corrects you, you can say, fuck off, I was there. And
I
then
was
you have a
there.
trump card to win no matter what.
Damn, I should have just made up everything then and been like, well, I was there.
Yeah, what are you going to tell me I'm wrong?
Yeah, exactly. You know, the Mexican government brought out this nuclear bomb. We're like, we're gonna fucking detonate this if you don't leave. And I jumped on it and like shielded everybody.
And I didn't even know Mexico had nukes, but hey, well, yeah. Add that to the list. Cool. Well, I reckon that sounds like a hell of an experience. And look, the more libertarian we become, the less we'll be able to travel the world without seeing the shortfalls and the oppressive states of elsewhere as we do. I suspect that South America and Central America are like an especially hot kind of region. I mean, unless obviously you travel to the fucking Gaza Strip right now, in which case, yeah, you can see a heap of government oppression there on every side, and also a million other horrors you probably don't want to see. But even in less war-torn areas of the world, I can only imagine that, we'd be outside of our comfort zone a little bit in terms of how sheltered we are here. Well, we'll leave it there for today then, unless you had any other burning stories you wanted to share, Max.
No, just to our listeners, tune in next week for lessons on how to make Molotov cocktails and how to burn down your government building. I'm kidding.
Yeah, for YouTube official purposes, that is a joke.
Yeah, sorry, ACO.
So if you do like and listen to the show, chuck us a like on YouTube or whatever platform you're listening us to. Feel free to subscribe to us. We are on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and Spotify. You can follow us at all those locations. And tune in next time where we'll have more shit to talk. So that's all for today. Catch you later.
Adios, amigo.